Sure. Okay. Oh. All right. Let me actually do one thing real fast. I'm just going to turn the volume down on my headphones. Okay. I'm ready. In 3, 2, 1. Raunchy reproduction. That's exactly right. Oh, no, just that I'm excited to get back into the swing of things. Um, I last spring I took a new job as a camp director, and I've been doing that all summer, running a summer camp, and it's been a lot of fun. We send our campers all over New England, and I mean we even have a Colorado trip, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, it's just when you run in a summer camp, you're kind of on the job 24/7, and took a little bit of a sabbatical to focus on my new job. And not to try to burn myself out of everything I love. I appreciate you and your patience, Sean. But now that it's winter and I'm in the off season, I said winter as if it's actually winter. No. Now that winter's coming up, and yeah, I know, right? And it's the off season. Get ready to record a lot of episodes. So, yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that's what I've been up to. And you've been up to just what? Working, making that money. Nope. I currently have two. Well, nope, that's not true. I have one chipmunk living in my house, semi living in my house. Um, I had one coming in through the front door and one coming in through the back door. And I finally caught the one that was coming in through the front door. Um, Excuse me. I will tell you. Well, unfortunately, my front door. I need to ask to get it replaced, but I can see basically through the bottom of it. It's not great. It's just a really old door, and it doesn't quite fit right on the frame. And there's not like yeah. Tell me about it. Be a salesman. Ah. Sides the top are fine. The bottom is basically peeling away. It's not great. It needs to be replaced, but it's fine. I have pretty low standards, because ah, wrapping around full circle. No, I have very high standards in mates. um, maybe I haven't been so lucky in the past to all of my exes out there who hate me. Um, so, but yeah. Well, speaking of mates, uh, who wants to go first? I Yeah. So I guess we're about to find out if we chose the same. All right, let's hear it. Ah. That's crazy. Mm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. That's yeah. Femininity. Yeah, incredible. Um, that's so your talk is eerily similar to mine, um, which I'm spoiling mine, I guess, a little bit, but that's okay, because it's quite interesting. So, but I before we transition into mine, I saw cuttlefish when I was in Puerto Rico, and I was just like swimming in the ocean off of one of the islands that Puerto Rico owns. That's kind of just off the coast a little bit. I think it was Vieques, but anyway. And I'm kind of far out, but it's not. It stays really shallow for a really long time. At least the beach where I was, and I was just kind of floating, looking down, using some goggles. I might have had a snorkel on, but I don't remember. And all of a sudden, all these cuttlefish came up and like basically I wouldn't say sat because that's not the right word. Stayed still in like a perfectly straight line in front of me as if I was like speaking to them and they were my audience. And they would change colors in like a cascading event. One would be this kind of color and it would flash down and then it'd flash back in this like linear line with like an actual like beat to it. And that was really cool. And they just stood there looking at me, like clearly watching me do my thing while I watched them do theirs. And no, they were just, I think they were just curious, you know. And I like reached out because they were right in front of me to like try to see if I could like touch one. And as soon as I made contact with it, that one went transparent. And then in like a flash, almost all the rest went transparent and just scattered. And it was really interesting. So I'm really glad you picked the good old cuttlefish. So yeah, I get why you'd be interested in them after watching a documentary on their mating. So yeah, but yeah, yeah, but like if you took like a squid and you simplified it as basic as possible. So yeah, 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 the cuttle bone. Yeah. Oh, I don't think I'll ever see something like it again. I just I got lucky, I guess. So that was pretty cool. Everybody else saw like I think a few sea turtles, which I didn't get to see, but hey, it's all trade offs. So yeah, well, I'll jump into mine here, and so I was trying to figure out what to talk about because, like you said, this is so much. There's so much here. Sex sells a lot and across many animals and groups of animals. And I kind of went with one that I kind of went, I guess, back to my roots, I suppose, and thinking about stuff I've talked about in my class. And I had one student the first year I taught entomology whose favorite insect was the stag beetle. And I kind of got through that through, a few dominoes, but they essentially do the same thing as the other insects I was interested in doing. But stag beetles, they're beetles belonging to the family Lucanidae. They have they're large. Well, they vary in size, but the largest of them can be pretty large. So, like for example, in Europe, some of the largest beetles in Europe are stag beetles. And for those of you who don't know, think of a really big beetle, and then think of a beetle with really big jaws that come out kind of like laterally, I guess, off to the sides and kind of scoop around. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. And so there are lots of others like the rhinoceros beetle, which has a big horn on its head. The Hercules beetle, similar. But the stag beetles are a little bit simpler, but they do have really big jaws. And those jaws are specifically found on the males, and they're used as weapons essentially in fierce battle over mates. And we've talked about maybe before, and you might have heard it in your biology classes, the 4 F's that drive our behavior. Well, 3 of them apply in this situation, but one of them not necessarily the way you might think. The 3 that I want to talk about is we have fight and flight and mating. I'm not going to use... That's the whole... Fucking. We're allowed it. Yep, that's okay. We could be PG-13 and have one F-bomb. Anyway, so let's break it down a little bit. There's kind of 3 main steps that these stag beetles go about. The first is the actual search for a mate. So in early summer, male stag beetles emerge as adults, and they fly mostly at dusk around and looking for a mate. And what they're looking for are the females, obviously. But the females have the same general body plan, but they have much smaller mandibles. And they're typically found near the ground, near decaying wood. That's where they'll lay their eggs. So females, like many animals, release pheromones that attract males to their location. But males can be attracted to both the female pheromones and sap flows, rotting wood, the stuff that rotting wood kind of releases out into the air, ethanol and stuff like that. So these beetles are searching for that because if they can find that, maybe there'll be a female present. And he might be the first one there. But essentially what happens is once a female is ready to mate, she's released the pheromones, all of these males are going to come in and they're going to fight. And they engage in combat, and they use these huge antler-like mandibles to do that. So when they meet, they raise their heads up and they open their mandibles wide, and essentially like an initial like, hey, what's up? Well, yeah. And then they engage in the actual wrestling match where they do this like sumo style wrestling where they kind of butt into each other and essentially attempt to throw the mate away. And this might mean throwing them out of this like general area. If they happen to be on like a fallen log or something, then they'll throw the mate off the log, depending on where they're at. But essentially the idea is to get one of them defeated by throwing them off of something, turning them on their back, and then that male will win. But you might have many, many males competing for one female, and there's lots of fighting going on, and it's kind of a display of the toughness and the biggest until one male dominates above all. Then, once he's defeated his rivals, he begins a courtship ritual, which he will approach the female, circling around, raising his mandibles up her in kind of like a, hey, yeah, did you see how tough I am? And if the female accepts it, which, if she usually does at that point, the male will go behind her. And if you notice, like I've been calling their mandibles antler-like because they have these horns, these horn-like appendages that kind of stick inside. And it's eerily weird how from the tip of their mandible to their first initial little horn, that fits perfectly to kind of hold on to the, in between the female's head and thorax, so that he can hold on while the copulation is actually occurring. And it can last from several minutes to hours, depending on that. And once copulation is done, the male essentially attempts to get rid of the female and kind of tosses her to the side to make sure that other males aren't going to kind of come up and try to mate with her as well. So yeah. Yeah, it's a brutal world. So I don't know what's better, giving somebody taxi money, or I guess nowadays it'd be Venmoing someone for an Uber, or just tossing them out the balcony. So thanks, appreciate it. That's exactly right. So yeah, so sometimes I'm glad to be a human. We can actually do the niceties. But anyway, but here's the twist. Like yours, not every stag beetle plays by the same rules, and some of them do things in a little bit different way. So I read a report on the European stag beetle, Lucanus cervus. It's the largest beetle in Europe. It's a protected species. It's what's called a flagship species, meaning that it has, culturally and environmentally importance to that area. And so people protect it for those reasons. But it's also declining, so there's lots of reasons to protect it as well. And so these scientists, they were watching and they were observing this typical kind of, one-on-one combat between the largest of the males. But you mentioned, Sean, this thing called sexual dimorphism, where males look a lot different from females. But like yours in the cuttlefish, males also differ and can differ specifically in stag beetles pretty significantly to make up what's called polymorphism, where males can either be really big and their mandibles are disproportionately bigger than some of the other males who have much smaller mandibles, even though they're the same species. And the idea is, well, how could the smaller males with the smaller mandibles even try to compete and fight against these other ones? They just can't. So they cheat, similar to what yours are, but they obviously can't change their color. But what they do is try to get the females before the other males even have a chance to find them. So instead of these ground battles, researchers were looking at what they eventually would call flight aggregations, where a swarm of beetles will circle up in the air, waiting for a female to fly kind of by. And the males will all chase after her and try to grab her in the air. And so, well, what happens? The smaller males win more often because they're lighter, they're more agile, and they're better flyers. Their smaller jaws don't weigh them down, and they're able to essentially outspeed and outmaneuver these larger males that have these big, huge, giant mandibles, and they grab onto the females, which immediately causes both of them to fall to the ground, where the goal is to mate with her as fast as possible before all of the males chasing them catch up and throw them off. That's exactly right. And they found that it's actually successful. But it's only successful if they can grab them midair and they can fall down quickly enough. Because if the copulation, the mating hasn't started by the time these larger males come off, they'll essentially just rip that little guy off and go in and, take their prize, quote unquote, right? So it's an interesting means, right? Evolution doesn't always produce this one type of thing in animals. Multiple strategies can come about, each with their pros and cons, in order to actually make passing along your genes possible within the same species, which I think is fun. And it's interesting that you and I both chose examples of that. So, yeah. Right. Where is the selective pressure most at right now? I don't know. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the researchers, they're Italian, so I'm not even going to attempt to say their names. Um, but they didn't talk about, their the future there. Um, their paper was actually quite short, but it was super interesting to kind of read. But where this comes about is what I was thinking about initially was this thing that has kind of been going on for a long time, specifically in Asian countries, China, Japan, the Philippines, where people will essentially, pit beetles together against each other and bet on it, similar to chicken fighting. And so they will selectively breed for these beetles to have, to be bigger and stronger. And if yours is a better male, then it can be worth tons and tons of money because this is such like a big thing that they've done so long. And it's so popular that today I learned there's this thing called Mushy King. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's called the King of Beetles, or the Battle of Beetles. In 2003, a collectible card game arcade game developed by Sega put out these essentially playing cards that you would use in an actual like arcade game machine and carry out battles electronically between beetles. And there's like 36 different beetles to collect, and they're all different species, and you'd essentially like fight them against other people. So you'd have these, it's like if you were to play Magic the Gathering Arena, but you had to have the physical cards in order to play it. Kind of like that. That's a good question. I unfortunately, I don't necessarily know if it's still much a thing. I didn't read a whole lot about it. Most of everything ends in 2006 to 2008. So yeah, but mm, oh, right, 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 right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. No, smaller fish. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, one that I was thinking of, and it's there's, I mean, it is what it is. So hippopotamus. So okay, I guess let me back up. Many animals have glands that surround their anus, and think like a skunk, right? The most iconic version of that, where they spray you by facing their butt towards you. Well, so many animals have those glands, and they're used in a variety of ways, such as defense, but in many cases it's used as um, a way for animals to communicate with members of their own species of the opposite sex to say, I'm ready for mating. And specifically, hippos, they have glands that release pheromones. Males do this thing where essentially they want to release their pheromones out into the water, into the air, to tell females like, hey, it's time, get ready. And they will, as they're pooping, they will swing their tail back and forth super duper fast. So they're pooping. At the same time, these pheromone glands are releasing pheromones, mixing with the poop, and their tail is flinging it across the land. And they'll just sit there and poop, and it just squirts out. It's horrible to watch. It's so gross. Yeah. Your wife must be so proud. Yeah, now that you're already together, she's like, yeah, I'm over this. Yep. Yeah, beautiful. So that was kind of my honorable mention that I wanted to talk about. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, classic. Yeah, that's a way to spend the weekend with the boys. So, no. But they're hermaphroditic, so they can lay eggs and fertilize eggs, which is why two males you can't really call them males, but that's why two sea slugs are fighting. Um, so love it. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So much. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And just the amount of animals that, yeah, specifically change their environment to attract a female. So, yeah, I was thinking that said something about me when I was finally picking it. So, underdogs got to have a win every once in a while, is what I say. Yeah, that's all right. Well, on that note, I think we'll end it. It's been good to get back into recording, but I think it's time to play some magic. All right. How?